Coming up on Tech News Weekly, Mark Zuckerberg talked all about the need for government regulation of Facebook. Dan Moren from Six Colors shares his insights on iPadOS and the Catalina beta. And I take a first look at the newly released Raspberry Pi 4B. All that and more coming up next on Tech News Weekly.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is Tech News Weekly, episode 89, recorded Thursday, June 27th, 2019. This episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by Worldwide Technology. Worldwide Technology's Advanced Technology Center is like no other testing and research lab, with more than $500 million of equipment, including OEMs like Dell EMC, and it's virtual, so you can access it 24/7. To learn more and get insights into all that it offers, go to wwt.com/twit. And by FreshBooks, the #1 accounting software in the cloud for self-employed professionals and their teams. Make confident business decisions with ease while using FreshBooks. Try it free for 30 days at freshbooks.com/TNW. Hello and welcome to Tech News Weekly. This is the show where every week we talk to people making and breaking tech news online. I'm Jason Howell. Megan Moroney is out. So Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg took to the stage at the Aspen Ideas Festival to field some difficult questions. And as this is Facebook that we're talking about, there are plenty of those to pick apart. So joining me to do that, to pick apart his comments and a whole lot more from the event, is Sal Rodriquez, technology reporter for CNBC.com. Welcome to the show, Sal.
Hey there, Jason. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. It's great to get you on, and we really appreciate your time. So, first of all, you wrote about his comments related to Russian interference in the 2016 elections. Zuckerberg seemed to imply that Facebook wasn't really the best entity to solve this issue, that the American government maybe dropped the ball. But is Facebook kind of punting its own responsibility in this matter? What's your take on that?
So the reason that I zeroed in on that particular comment from Mark Zuckerberg is that, you know, in this particular year, he's really been making the rounds in terms of public appearances, conversations with the media. And for the most part, if you cover it like I do, he tends to say the same boilerplate comments. This was, however, the first time that he made this type of comment, which was, it was a bit of a punt. It was saying that Facebook can't do this all by itself. However, nothing that he said seemed to be factually inaccurate. You know, Facebook has ramped up the defenses that it has been putting in place since the 2016 election to combat this type of activity. And it's done a pretty solid job keeping reporters and the public in the loop as to, you know, its actions when it comes to removing groups who are, as they call it, engaged in coordinated inauthentic activity. You know, we've heard reports from them. We heard one in November and on the eve of the midterm elections where they booted a whole network of Russian trolls. We heard the same in January and I believe in March as well when it came to networks from groups in Iran, Russia, and some other countries. So it is a bit of a punt. However, Facebook has been ramping up its defenses. I think what Mark was trying to highlight is that as much as Facebook can block these type of attacks, they really won't stop coming unless some sort of action is taken by the U.S. government.
And, you know, that's highlighted by the fact that Zuckerberg, you know, was it a month ago, wrote the op-ed about some sort of regulation, which I think is kind of the overarching theme of a lot of what was discussed at this event. Zuckerberg talked about inviting government regulation to aid in election integrity, that Facebook, like you said, should not be the final word on some of these decisions. But what exactly happens? What is Facebook doing in the interim while, you know, maybe it waits for regulation, whether that comes or not? It's probably going to come, let's be honest, but what do you think?
Yeah, so I mean, it does certainly seem like regulation will come at some point. Who knows how soon that could be? Obviously, that, you know, that's a big topic of conversation amongst all the presidential candidates, right?
Sure.
But, you know, it could be years before anything like that happens. So in the meantime, what Facebook is trying to do is impose more of a self-regulation so as to, you know, keep keep everyone concerned a little more calm, perhaps regain some of the trust that the company has lost over the last year or two. The big thing this week, for example, is an oversight board that the company has been thinking about and discussing with stakeholders in terms of implementing. So the common way that this is thought of is essentially a Supreme Court for Facebook. So it's still very much in the early parts of the process. Facebook put out a report today discussing like what they think this could be, but essentially what it may become is a board where if there's some sort of content moderation issue that Facebook goes through, let's say a user complains that their post was removed incorrectly, that particular case could escalate all the way up to the Supreme Court, which could, at the moment, they're discussing having about 40 or so folks on it. That board would review, that particular case, and whatever they decide, essentially, would set the precedent for how those type of content removal appeals would be handled further down the line. So that's one example of what Facebook is thinking about in terms of self-regulation. And that's pretty much all that Facebook can really do between now and whenever, the U.S. government or any other governments decide to take more of a proactive action.
Yeah, I'm happy you mentioned that because that literally just happened a few hours ago. They made that announcement and kind of revealed that for everyone. The discussion at the from the stage was it yesterday? They talked about a number of other things. They also talked about this idea of splitting Facebook into pieces, which of course Zuckerberg is not too keen on that. Talk a little bit about what he had to say there, whether that would be a bad idea, which is probably where he's coming from.
Right. So this idea of breaking up Facebook has been gaining, some momentum over the past 6 or so months, even among some former Facebook co-founders, in particular, Chris Hughes, who wrote an op-ed for the New York Times where he argued that Facebook should be split up. In general, the idea is that the company would be split up into three, those being Facebook, WhatsApp, and Instagram, with WhatsApp and Instagram being, two of the most notable acquisitions that the company has ever made. So Zuckerberg was asked about this. He certainly didn't bring it up, and he very quickly pointed out that he did not agree, with that idea. His arguments for that are that the company is spending billions of dollars building up its defenses against those type of attacks to protect, its services from things like election interference, misinformation, spam, terrorism content, and any child pornography and any of that type of bad content that any social network would want to keep off of its services. The argument here that Zuckerberg makes, and a lot of his deputies do as well, for example, Adam Mosseri, the head of Instagram, has publicly said that he agrees with this, is that by building their defenses all together, they are able to more efficiently block that type of content across not just Facebook, but the other apps that also fall in the Facebook empire.
Interesting. And Zuckerberg has also been talking a lot about data portability. Were there any hints as far as whether users might enjoy more access or might actually have some sort of controls over who owns that data? I think that was talked about a little bit. Who exactly owns this data? What did he have to say there?
What he said there is that data portability is something that Facebook is in favor of, and that's about it. We really haven't gotten into too many details as to, what exactly they would be in favor of, having be portable. In Europe, this is something that is actually already law through GDPR. Right. Consumers' data should be portable. And so Facebook is tying itself to that boat, but they're being very vague about what should be done. So this is kind of like a very easy rhetoric to put out there and, throw toward lawmakers without really getting too into the weeds of. So what exactly happens there, we really don't know. Facebook really hasn't taken much of a stance besides saying that, this is an idea we would be in favor of.
Yeah, right. And you let your imaginations run wild and maybe it'll work in our favor. Deep fakes is something that we're hearing more and more. We're hearing about the possible threatening potential of deep fakes, but we're starting to actually see kind of what can happen with these. Most recently, it involved Mark himself with a deep fake that ended up on the social network. What did he have to say about the line that's being drawn around what constitutes a fake video and whether Facebook should actually take action on this or on whether people view it or not? What did he have to say about that?
Yeah, so what Zuckerberg had to say when it came to deep fakes is that the company is very much in the process of defining how exactly it's going to be handling this type of content. He said that certainly this is some form of misinformation, but he doesn't think that it should be treated necessarily the way that fake news is when it comes to Facebook posts. The comparison that he made is that deep fakes are similar to spam in that, yes, they are misinformation, but they're so different that we should carve out its own policies regarding this type of content in particular. So that was actually an idea that I hadn't heard before. I found that to be pretty interesting. And the point that he was making is that what you may consider to be a deep fake might not be considered a deep fake to someone else. So essentially what he was saying is that they really need to define where you draw the line on what exactly is a deep fake. Is a simple video edit a deep fake? If I edit something and it keeps the gist of a quote there, but you said the quote and you know that there was more to it, is that exactly a deep fake? Who knows, right? Or I think another example of where this line is a few months back when the Trump administration put out a video from that CNN reporter, I can't recall his name right now, where he was trying to keep the mic away from the Trump aide. A lot of folks argued that was a deep fake, or that and the administration certainly argued that was not. So I think that's an example of what the contention that Facebook has when it comes to that particular conversation.
Yeah, I think that was Jim Acosta, possibly from CNN. And then, of course, tying directly into this is the Nancy Pelosi video from a couple of weeks ago, which wasn't necessarily a deep fake. If you want to be specific about what it was, they slowed down her audio. So does that constitute this? And is it now illegal to slow down audio, or whatever the case may be? So I can understand the difficulty drawing that line. Overall, Facebook's pushing for regulation, which is a very unique position for a company as large as Facebook to be in, for them to say, yes, please regulate us, because that's going to help us, help inform us as to how we can actually tackle some of these issues. My question there is that a genie that once it's out of the bottle, Facebook might someday wish they could put back in? What do you think?
That very well could be the case. Perhaps once regulation does arrive, it goes a little further than Facebook may want, but we're not there. And I don't think we're going to be there anytime before the 2020 election. So I think in some ways, this argument actually buys time for Facebook. At the same time, there are folks here in Silicon Valley. I've been to dinners with entrepreneurs, with VCs, who actually think that when a company gets to the stage that Facebook is now, getting this type of regulation actually serves as a moat to defend against any disrupting, potential startups that could cause headaches for Facebook. So in some ways, there are folks here in Silicon Valley that believe this could be a benefit for Facebook.
Interesting. We'll certainly see. And Sal, it's a pleasure getting you on. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your day to talk with me about this. Salvador Rodriquez, CNBC.com. Where can people follow your work online?
Yeah, I think the best way to do it is just follow me on Twitter. My handle is Sal19. That's the number 19. Give me a follow.
Right on. Sal, thank you so much. We'll talk to you soon. Take care. Up next, Dan Moren from Six Colors walks us through his experience with the iPadOS beta and a little bit of the Catalina beta as well. But first, this episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by Worldwide Technology. WWT began building their Advanced Technology Center 10 years ago. It's grown exponentially. It's like no other testing and research lab. The lab actually contains more than $500 million in equipment from hundreds of OEMs, ranging from heavyweights like Dell EMC, VMware, and Intel, to emerging disruptors like Tanium, Equinix, and Expanse. WWT is a trusted partner who stays with you over the years. Many of their customers have been with them for over a decade because they know WWT is where they can go to get the answers that they need to make sure their business runs right. Their ATC is an incubator for IT innovation, and it offers a number of things. Hundreds of on-demand integrated solution labs representing the newest advances in flash storage, hyper-converged infrastructure, hybrid cloud and analytics, infrastructure automation, data protection, and a whole lot more. You can learn about products before you launch. WWT's engineers usually use these environments to quickly spin up proofs of concept and pilots using the sandbox so customers can confidently select the best solutions. In many cases, this reduces concept time from months to weeks, which increases speed to market, which is very important. They offer lab as a service, a dedicated lab space within the ATC. Here, customers can perform programmatic testing using the vast technology ecosystem that WWT has already built. It's virtual, so you can take full advantage of ATC's unique benefits anywhere in the world 24/7. WWT engineers work in these labs every day. They're beta testing new equipment. They're building reference architectures and custom integrations to help their customers make decisions and see results faster and with much less investment. Now, later this summer, WWT will be launching a new digital platform with hands-on access to more than 200 lab environments. And you can learn a whole lot more about WWT, the ATC, and sign up for pre-launch access to their new on-demand lab platform by going to wwt.com/twit. WWT simplifies the complex. That's wwt.com/twit. WWT, delivering business and technology outcomes around the world. And we thank them for their support of Tech News Weekly. Now, Apple wasn't expected to release the public beta hounds until July, but they surprised everyone by opening the gates a little earlier this week, in fact. Of course, eager Apple users pounced. One such pouncer is Dan Moren from 6 Colors. Welcome back to the show, Dan.
It's good to be here. Thanks, Jason.
I'm sorry if calling you a pouncer sounds strange, but I mean it in the best way possible.
No, we got to jump on those things.
Absolutely.
They're happening all the time.
So first of all, you spent a good deal of time with the new iPadOS beta, at least over the course of this last week, the last 4 days. What would you say is just the standout feature for you?
I think the biggest sort of standout feature that I've been working with, and I think that a lot of people will be interested in, is the revampments to multitasking. The ability to have multiple windows open for a single app is kind of a fundamental change in the iPadOS architecture, unlike anything we've seen before. This is the biggest innovation in multitasking for the iPad since the origin of split view. So this gives people a lot more ability to work with apps in a way that they might be accustomed to doing on their desktop, on their Mac or PC, because you can do things like drag a Safari into a new window or drag a mail message that you're composing into a separate pane while you're still reading another mail message. You can have any app sort of side by side with itself or with another app, and that whole multiple instance thing feels a lot more like the multi-windowing model we're used to from our desktop experience.
So, I mean, there are a lot of people that that have dedicated themselves to be like, no, I use my iPad. It's my main computer. Check it out. I can do it. Are you one of those people? And is this kind of like the kind of feature that would tie into that? Or what do you think?
I have not become an iPad convert entirely. I still use my MacBook for a lot of my day-to-day stuff in terms of portability, but I do use it on a fair account to write things, especially when, for me, things that I want to focus in on, tasks that I'm really like, all right, I don't want to be distracted. I want to focus on writing this column or what have you. So I think for those people, people who are more casual users, I think they might not take advantage of this as much as you might think, because I will say from my time with the beta, it's still a little confusing. It's very different from the way we expect our iPad to work so far.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a little conflict in terms of the way oh, now I can have the same app open in multiple places. That doesn't really make sense. It takes a little time to sort of, comprehend the new model. But I think for people who are power users, who are using their iPad day in, day out as their main computing device, this opens up a lot of power and a lot of possibilities.
Nice. Now, what about having the widgets on the home screen? As an Android user, I see that, and I feel like on Android, the widgets thing, it had its day and then it fizzled out. And now, man, I used to use widgets all the time and I just never use them anymore. I don't know why. Maybe I need to get back into the habit. But what's your take on widgets on the home screen and have it kind of integrated into the experience?
I really like it, and maybe it's that deep hunger left over from never being able to have that before. but it always felt, especially in the iPad, which has this gorgeous huge screen, that there was all this wasted space.
Totally.
And it's like, well,
totally.
why do I just have a grid of app icons? I could be using that to display other information. So the ability to pin a couple widgets to your screen, I think, makes a huge difference. It also exposes that information in a way that it was harder to find before, because the widgets used to be confined to the screen you had to swipe over to. And again, I think a lot of people didn't bother. There were other ways to get that information.
Yeah.
But now having the ability to, like, on my home screen, whenever I glance down, there's my weather report, or there's my calendar, next couple calendar items, or reminders list of things I need to do. I think that makes a lot of sense. And it's not disruptive, and it's not something that, like, if you don't want it, it's easy to swipe it away, even temporarily, and just have your home screen at your fingertips again. But I feel like, for me, and again, maybe it's because I'm starved for something like this. For me, I feel like I'm gonna get a lot of use out of it.
I think, and Apple makes these decisions. Usually they do things the right way, right? Like, they do things in a very usable way, user-focused, enjoyable way in the user experience. So I have no doubt that Apple will integrate the widgets in there and make it usable. I don't know why I've backed away from widgets. I just kind of have. I think, honestly,
embrace the widgets, Jason.
I need to embrace them again. I think what it is I use so many different devices now that, like, resetting them up on all of my different devices just takes enough time that I'm like, you know what? Forget it. Like, I'll just launch the app. That's just a little bit easier. So it's basically my laziness more than anything. Now, what about Safari? Because there was the claim that this is a desktop class browser on the iPad. What does that even mean, and would you agree with it?
Yeah, my understanding, based on sort of what it means and what Apple has done here, is they've done a lot of work behind the scenes to make sure that sites that a lot of people use on a daily basis, that were perhaps, we all had that issue where we go to a site on our iPad and get kind of a watered down version, whether it be the mobile version designed for iPhones or an entirely separate mobile version. Google Docs is one of the classic examples of this. You would go to a Google Docs spreadsheet or a Word file or something, and you'd open it up and you'd be like, this is not the same experience I'm getting on the browser on my Mac. And so Apple's done a lot of work behind the scenes to not only sort of circumvent getting shunted to those pages, but also making sure that when you load those pages, it goes well, it works well. So I loaded up, I'm in the midst of, I'm getting married in like 2 weeks. So we have a giant spreadsheet that is full of all this information. And I was like, well, this is going to be a good test for it. We got like 20 tabs in this spreadsheet. And I opened it up and it worked really well, scrolled really smoothly. Everything looked just like the desktop browser experience. And I think that's what Apple's going for, is not having iPad users feel like second-class citizens where rich web content is to be expected.
Right. Oh, and congratulations, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
You're very brave to trust your wedding planning to a beta. Just saying. Because I'm sure everything will go great.
Don't tell my fiance, just whatever you do.
Do not tell her that it's a beta. What about file access? Has it gone far enough for people who do want to use the iPad as their kind of primary device? Does it feel more like a computer, let's say?
Yeah, the Files app has gotten a significant revamp. The column view, I think, is going to be a big boon to those who use are very used to file management on the Mac. It's the same sort of idea with the 3-pane view and exposing things like the get info, so you can look at metadata in the Files app, makes it feel just way more like a desktop. I think in particular, the big advantage, of course, is going to be people who want to plug in external storage and get files off that. That's great, but it comes with some caveats. For one thing, I mean, if you've got one of the new iPad Pros that has a USB-C port built in and you've got a drive that uses USB-C, you're in pretty good shape. If you've got an older iPad, as I do, I've got a 10.5-inch Pro that has a Lightning connector, you need an adapter, of course, and you also need the most recent version of that adapter, because I have sort of the old camera connection kit, which is just a Lightning to USB-A port on it, and it does not provide enough power to even power like a flash drive. So you have to get something, the iPad adapter that has a separate port so you can plug it in and it gets enough power. So that's kind of a great if you're sitting around stationary. It's a little more cumbersome if you're taking your iPad on the go and just want to, plug in a flash drive to have to carry a whole separate dongle and a power cable and all that jazz. So I think newer users or users of newer iPads will benefit from that much more than those of us who have slightly older and now sadder iPads.
Oh, yeah, living the dongle life. That's just the way it is. Overall, this is beta. How stable is it? Like, do you recommend people who are even slightly interested to just go ahead? You have nothing to worry about.
People have been a lot more cautious about that one. And I would say, I would think I would echo those concerns if you're not a person who needs this either for development or a person like me who's writing about it. It's definitely kind of rough around the edges. I don't think it's necessarily quite as bad as a lot of people have said, but I do know there are people out there who have had problems with it, even with things like iCloud being tied to it and causing some issues with their iCloud accounts. So it's one of those things where I would definitely take a hesitant approach to it. If you have a device that you're not counting on, that's not a critical device to you, I would recommend that first. That's why I did my iPad. It's sort of the least critical of all the devices I own. You're going to see app crashes. I've had, a couple springboard crashes and things like that, but nothing catastrophic. It's just very rough around the edges.
Right. Well, you went one step further because apparently you just installed the Catalina beta to use, but on a separate hard drive, so not your main machine,
Yes.
so you can boot into it and kind of test it out and everything. What have you noticed so far? Like in your short time playing around with that, what stands out for you?
One of the things that stands out for me in the Catalina beta, and I think this will be a welcome addition, is screen time. Screen time was added in iOS last year, and in this year it makes it to the Mac as well. And one of the reasons that's a really big deal is because screen time is, Apple's initiative to sort of have us all be aware of how much time we are spending on our devices. And it always painted kind of an incomplete picture because it could look at your iOS devices and your phone, your tablet, and sort of gain from that how much time you're spending on devices. But a lot of us still sit at a computer all day. So for those of us who were doing that as well, it didn't really give you the whole story. So now screen time has been brought over to the Mac. It syncs and is integrated with all your screen time on your iOS devices. And it also works as a way to manage accounts for, say, if you've got kids and you want to prohibit them from using certain apps or not let them use their devices at certain times of day. And all that stuff is sort of in a more holistic device management system. So I think that's going to get a lot of people excited about that whole piece of technology.
Nice. One of the features that I like, and it kind of ties in with the the iPad discussion before that last question, is Sidecar, the ability to kind of turn your iPad into a second screen, which sounds really nice. But how does it like? Have you had a chance to play around with that to kind of see like, is there any lag or is there any weird like associated oddity that comes with it? It's like, yeah, it's neat, but
I went to try it out and sadly discovered that Sidecar is a feature that's a little more limited than some of the other features, and it doesn't work because my MacBook is too old. I have a 2014, and you need the latest MacBook Air. There are specific requirements for it. So I was kind of bummed about that because I too was kind of interested in checking it out. My understanding from people I've talked to who've used it is that it's especially beneficial if you want to use your iPad as kind of like a graphics tablet, because it really only works with Apple Pencil input for sort of the main part of the main interface with the iPad when it's connected. It's also something that you can't necessarily use when you go really far away from your Mac because it's dependent on Bluetooth and Wi-Fi. So it's really designed to be used while you're at your Mac. So there are a lot of caveats here when it comes to using Sidecar. I think there are a bunch of people who will benefit a lot from that. But I think it's a smaller group than everybody necessarily. I think a lot of people will kind of be like, oh, I play around with that once or twice, and then maybe it just doesn't come up again.
Yeah, right. Oh, that's neat. Nice to know that it does that.
Yeah.
Moving on. I thought this was great. Accessibility, I feel like Apple has been really good. They've always been very good in their devices about kind of creating with accessibility in mind. And now they have voice control, an accessibility feature set in Catalina. Talk a little bit about that and what that enables.
Yeah, so voice control is a really just in-depth way to control every single part of your Mac using nothing but your voice. Obviously, this is designed primarily for people who have motion limitations and disabilities that prevent them from using traditional input devices like keyboards and mice. It's incredibly powerful. Just things that you wouldn't think of in terms of being able to control stuff on your screen, being able to say, I'm going to divvy up my screen into all these different quadrants and then sort of zoom in on them, right? Like you think of something as simple as zooming a map and how hard that is if you don't have the ability to use a keyboard or a mouse or a trackpad or what have you. And so voice control basically makes the entire screen addressable and lets you just say like, oh, this, quadrant 14, zoom in on that. Or drag down this menu again, like all this stuff that's we take for granted. Totally. That is really hard to do if you don't have the ability to use a traditional input device. They've exposed that, and from my brief time with it just looks like it's really tied into the system at the lowest levels, and that makes a huge difference.
Absolutely, it sounds like it's fully integrated. Right on. Good stuff. So this has nothing to do with Apple, but or at least I don't think it does. Maybe it does deep in the weeds, but you're working on a new book. You are, of course, an author, and people should definitely read the stuff you write. I know that you can't talk too much about it, but what can you talk about?
I can say it's a sequel to my most recent novel. That was The Bayern Agenda. It came out in March. Yeah. This is due to come out next March, and it's in the same vein, follow-up story, space spy adventures, and hopefully people like it.
That's fantastic. So if you want to follow Dan and the work that you're doing, both in the Apple sphere and then in the non-Apple sphere, where do you want people to follow you?
I'm on Twitter at dmoren, and you can go to my website, which is also dmoren.com. And of course, you can read all my tech stuff at sixcolors.com. And I host a bunch of podcasts, like Clockwise and The Rebound. So you can always find me there as well. That's
right. Dan, so great to get you on. Thank you for hopping on with me today. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Jason. It was a blast.
All right. We'll talk to you soon. Take care.
Take it easy.
All right. Up next, I got myself some pie, a Raspberry Pi 4, actually. And I'm very excited to show it off. So I'm going to do that. But first, this episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by FreshBooks, the #1 accounting software that makes dealing with your business finances painless. When we all really want that, right? We don't want pain when it comes to our finances. So you can stop wasting precious time creating invoices, following up on payments, trying to figure out where your business stands. You don't want any of that. So let FreshBooks help your business be its best self. FreshBooks lives in the cloud, so you can securely access it from your desktop, phone, and tablet, wherever you happen to be. With FreshBooks mobile apps, you'll easily stay connected with your clients, be able to take care of your accounting anywhere. So you can keep a finger on the pulse of your business, which as a business owner or when you're running your business, that's exactly what you need. You need that direct insight. FreshBooks offers powerful features like creating and sending invoices. You can accept credit card payments, easily offer discounts, track your productivity, create customizable proposals. There's multi-currency billing, automatic tax calculations, and a whole lot more. Go to the website and you'll see it's like feature after feature after feature, and they're all useful for you. Are you busy and maybe you forget to follow up with your business finances? Well, with FreshBooks, you can put your business on autopilot, from sending reminders to securely charging your client's credit card. You can choose to automate as much or as little of your business as you like. And you can accept payments online with FreshBooks and get paid 2 times faster. FreshBooks is used and trusted by small business owners in over 120 countries. And you should really check them out. Why haven't you joined the over 24 million people who have used FreshBooks? Visit freshbooks.com/TNW and enter Tech News Weekly in the How Did You Hear About Us section. You'll receive 30 days free when you do that. That's freshbooks.com/TNW. Enter Tech News Weekly, and you'll receive 30 days free. And you'll let them know that you got there from Tech News Weekly. And we thank FreshBooks for their support. Surprise! If you were like me, then you certainly did not expect that the next generation Raspberry Pi would drop so unexpectedly this week. Lucky us, it actually happened. It actually totally took me by surprise earlier this week. The Raspberry Pi 4 Model B is the first flagship level update since the Pi 3 Model B. I have it right here, in fact, well, it's inside here. And the Pi 3 released more than 3 years ago. So one thing that never changes with the Pi, and it's kind of crazy that it doesn't, considering all the upgrades, is the price. $35 gets you the computer that you see inside here. It's all that it takes for the baseline model with 1 gig of RAM. What's a little different this time around is that you can also choose a 2 gig version for $45 as well as a 4 gig memory version for $55. Honestly, Pi fans have been waiting patiently for a major upgrade to all of the meaningful specs. This bad boy, I believe, was worth the wait. I'm going to test it out and check that out for sure for myself. But what I have right here, actually, the whole setup here is the Raspberry Pi 4 desktop kit. This is everything you need to turn the little Pi into a fully fledged desktop computing environment. Let's snap that lid on there. So you get everything that you see here, and I'll kind of pick them apart and talk about them. First, there's the Pi itself. It's hidden inside of this case here that came with the kit. The case is, like I said, included, but if you're buying the Pi a la carte, you'd end up with just the little computer that's inside. The Pi 4 is still about the size of a deck of cards. Makes it incredibly versatile and easy to hide inside your project of choice, whatever you happen to be creating with this tiny little computer. You know, it's always really easy to hide these things wherever they happen to be, and they fasten with those little holes, 4 of them around the device. So it makes it really easy to mount them inside. The processor is now a quad-core 64-bit ARM V8. It's clocked at 1.5 gigahertz. Pi fans know that it's relatively easy and rather common to overclock depending on your application. And this architecture supports H.265 hardware video decoding, which is a very nice perk. The Pi now has, let's see if I can show this, not one, but 2 separate micro HDMI ports. I have one plugged in here and then a second one right next to it. Those are both capable of driving a dual 4K monitor setup at 30 frames per second each. Or the way I have it plugged in right now, it's a single cable. That's a single 4K monitor at 60 frames per second. So you can kind of determine what your needs are. You will need, however, as it is a micro HDMI port, you're going to need a micro HDMI to standard HDMI cable to plug into your monitor. This kit, this desktop kit, does supply 2 of those cables, so that kind of makes it really easy right out of the box. Now, next to it over here, the Pi 4 draws more power than the Pi 3 before it. As such, it's now powered through a USB-C port. That's right here. And the desktop kit does include the proper power brick for that. There are 2 USB ports. Let's see if I can flip this around for you here. There we go. There are 2 USB 3.0 ports as well as 2 USB 2.0 ports on the side. I'm using one of them to plug the keyboard right now. It also has a gigabit Ethernet port, and inside supports wireless AC for improved bandwidth and connection speed. Bluetooth also got a bump from 4.2 to the latest 5.0 spec. Oh, and memory transfer speeds have improved. So that's thanks to a switch from LPDDR2 to LPDDR4. Now, outside of all of that, if I flip this around, you can kind of see right underneath there, you do have the micro SD card slot, which will house your system images. Still also on the side, a standard Courage port, as I like to call it, but it's really just a headphone port. And, you know, really, it's just still the awesome little computer that it's always been. It's just made to be better and faster than ever before. And also included in the desktop kit, you get this keyboard that I have out on the desk here. Here, I'm going to snap that back closed here. You get this nice Raspberry Pi keyboard, which will hold out for you. That plugs in via USB, of course, and then a little Raspberry Pi mouse. It's a micro USB mouse that you can plug right into the keyboard. And it has kind of a shortened cable, so it doesn't totally get in the way. Also included in the box, I forgot to bring it in here, is the official Raspberry Pi Beginner's Guide to get you all excited to nerd out with your new toy. So included in the kit that I received, and in actually that micro SD card slot, is a micro SD card with Noobs. It's an LXDE-based desktop environment for Raspbian. So this is the desktop environment. It means that out of the box, you literally have a desktop computing environment with which to get started. If you cut to the video that we have feeding in to the system, you can kind of take a look at it. Let's see here. There it is. I'll move my mouse so you can kind of see where I'm at. But this is the desktop environment. To get started, you also have, you have a, let's see here, the Chromium browser, which you can open, and it's all set up to connect to our wireless internet here. But you can, open up and browse to your heart's content. It's basically a Chrome browser. You also have a full file manager, as you can see here. It's kind of a basic approach for a desktop environment, and there's a whole bunch of other features in here. Many users are probably going to opt to flash their own favorite flavor of Linux on the device. That's kind of the beauty of this package. It's all about customizing it to your own preferences, and it's designed to make that pretty simple. It's pretty amazing what you can do with the Raspberry Pi. I love these things. So I've only just received all of this. I'm eager to put it through its paces. Top of my personal list is testing out some emulation capabilities. It's really what I use most of my Raspberry Pis for, most at home. The Nintendo 64 is kind of a tricky console to test out. It has been with previous Pis, previous iterations. For the past few years, the emulation community has kind of been champing at the bit for improved Pi hardware to possibly make it happen finally. Time's going to tell on that front. Things appear to be pretty promising based on what we know right now. The main problem right now is that RetroPie isn't even ready for the Pi 4 yet. And it could honestly be a while before it is. It's going to take some time for them to create that to this hardware. But there's enough of a community there. I have faith that they're going to get right on it. So you can expect an update on that somewhere down the line once that actually happens, because that's going to be what I'm going to be doing. And by the way, I'll just get this in here real quick. This is the Raspberry Pi Beginner's Guide that comes in the desktop kit. The desktop kit runs around $120, so it includes all of this stuff, and you can go check that out. I'm super excited about the potential of this upgrade. It's been a long time coming. I'm happy with the changes. You can head over to raspberrypi.org to read up and find links to online stores like Adafruit that are selling the new hardware now. You can check it out, and hey, email us, tnw@twit.tv. Let us know what you plan to use your new Pi for. I would love to hear from you to see what you're going to put this hardware to work on. Tech News Weekly records live every Thursday at 11 a.m. Pacific at twit.tv/live. You can be part of the show by emailing us at tnw@twit.tv. And you can always, reach out to me on Twitter. You can find me at Jason Howell if you want to find me there. If you want to subscribe to our show, that's twit.tv/TNW. That's where basically all the information about this show is kept. And that's the most important thing to look for. Occasionally we have visitors in the studio. Today we have Steve Burnell from Westford, Massachusetts sitting in. Steve, thanks so much for hopping in. It's great to have you here. Makes me feel like the show's just a little bit more important on days that we have guests in the studio. There he is. And big thanks to everyone who helps us do this show. John, Jeff, Burke, you need to change your name to a name that starts with J. And that's it for this week. We'll see y'all next week on another. Oh, and also Anthony for filming as well. Thank you, Anthony. We'll see you next week on Tech News Weekly. Bye, everybody. As Anthony walks away. Oh, forgot about that.